How did a failed artist become one of the most feared dictators in history? How did one man's voice lead the world into war and genocide? In this video, you will learn English through the powerful and tragic story of Adolf Hitler. Follow along as we explore his life, rise to power, and the lasting impact of his actions, all in clear, easy English designed for learners. This is more than history. It's a lesson about leadership, choices, and the power of words. Turn on subtitles, follow the story, and grow your vocabulary while learning about one of the most important chapters in world history. Have you ever wondered how a boy with a dream of becoming an artist became one of history's most feared leaders? This is the beginning of Adolf Hitler's story, one that starts in a small town, full of confusion, frustration, and a search for identity. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889 in a town called Braunau am Inn. This small town was in Austria, close to the border of Germany. His family was not rich, but they were not poor either. His father, Adolf Hitler, worked for the government as a customs officer. He was strict and wanted his son to have a safe, respectable job. His mother, Clara, was kind and quiet. She loved her son deeply. As a child, Hitler was very close to his mother. He respected his father but did not enjoy their relationship. His father wanted him to work in the civil service, but Hitler had other ideas. He wanted to become an artist. He liked to draw and paint. He was especially interested in buildings. He dreamed of going to art school in Vienna, the capital city of Austria, but life was not simple. Hitler's school life was difficult. He was not a great student. He liked history and art but had trouble with science and math. He often argued with his teachers. He felt misunderstood. When his father died in 1903, Hitler was only 14. He continued to live with his mother, and his dream of becoming an artist grew stronger. In 1907, Hitler moved to Vienna. He was 18 years old. He wanted to enter the Academy of Fine Arts. He took the entrance exam, but the school rejected him. They said he had talent for drawing buildings but not for painting people. He tried again the next year. He was rejected a second time. This was a huge disappointment. That same year, his mother died. She had been very sick with cancer. Hitler was heartbroken. He had lost the person he loved most. He had also lost his dream. He now had no family, no money, and no clear future. He stayed in Vienna, but life there was hard. Hitler lived in cheap rooms and sometimes even on the streets. He sold small paintings and postcards to survive. He watched people. He listened to their conversations. He read newspapers. He started to form ideas about the world. Many of these ideas were angry and extreme. Vienna was a large, modern city. It had people from many cultures and religions. There were Germans, Jews, Slavs, Hungarians, and many others. Hitler began to feel confused and afraid of these differences. He believed that German-speaking people were better than others. He believed in a strong German identity. During this time, Hitler started reading books that supported racist and anti-Semitic ideas. He blamed Jewish people for many of the problems in the world. He also began to admire strong leaders who used power and control to get what they wanted. These early thoughts would become the base of his future beliefs. But even with these growing ideas, Hitler's life was still a struggle. He failed to find a career. He failed to build friendships. He was lonely, bitter, and poor. He lived like this for several years. This time in Vienna was dark and cold, both outside and inside his mind. In 1913, Hitler left Vienna and moved to Munich, Germany. He wanted a fresh start. He still had no job, no education, and no plan. But he loved Germany. He believed it was stronger, more organized, and more important than Austria. He saw himself not just as an Austrian, but as a true German at heart. 1 year later, in 1914, World War I began. Germany and Austria were on one side. France, Britain, and Russia were on the other. Hitler joined the German army as a soldier. He finally had a purpose. For the first time in his life, he felt important. He wore a uniform, he carried a weapon. He followed orders, he belonged. In the army, Hitler was quiet and serious. He followed rules. He never rose to a high rank, but he earned medals for bravery. He was injured twice. He spent time in a hospital. When Germany lost the war in 1918, Hitler was shocked. He could not believe it. He did not understand why they lost. He felt betrayed. Many Germans after the war were angry and confused. The country was poor, people were hungry, the government was weak. Hitler, like many others, believed that Germany had been stabbed in the back. He thought traitors, communists, and Jews had made Germany lose the war. This belief was not based on fact, but it became a powerful idea. It gave people someone to blame. It gave Hitler a reason to speak, to organize, and to act. He was no longer just a failed artist or a lost soldier. He was becoming something else. He was becoming a voice of anger in a country full of pain. And so, a boy who once dreamed of drawing buildings began to draw plans for power. His path was just beginning. The world would never be the same. The story of how this broken young man became a dangerous leader continues. After Germany's defeat in World War I, the country was left in ruins. The economy collapsed. Millions were unemployed. Food was scarce. People were angry, lost, and afraid. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, made everything worse. Germany had to take full blame for the war. It had to pay billions in reparations. It lost land and pride. Adolf Hitler was one of many soldiers who returned to a broken country, but he came back with more than just disappointment. He came back with ideas. He believed that Germany had not lost the war on the battlefield. Instead, he believed it was betrayed from the inside. This belief would shape everything he would do next. In 1919, Hitler joined a small political group in Munich. It was called the German Workers' Party. At first, it was just one of many radical groups. But Hitler quickly stood out. He was a powerful speaker. His voice was loud. His words were full of emotion. He knew how to use anger and fear. He talked about Germany's pain. He promised hope, strength, and pride. In 1920, the group changed its name. It became the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. Their ideas were extreme. They wanted to rebuild Germany's power. They hated democracy. They believed in one strong leader. They also believed in the idea of a pure German race. They blamed Jewish people, communists, and others for the country's problems. Hitler rose quickly in the party. He took control. He organized marches and meetings. He used symbols and flags. He created uniforms. The party began to grow. People were drawn to his energy and message. They felt proud again. They believed change was possible. In 1923, Hitler made his first big move. He and his followers tried to take over the government in Munich. This event is known as the Beer Hall Putsch. It failed. The police stopped them. People died. Hitler was arrested. He was put on trial. But even during the trial, he spoke with power. He turned the courtroom into a stage. He was sent to prison for 5 years but served only 9 months. During that time, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. In the book, he explained his beliefs. He talked about race, power, and Germany's future. He blamed Jews for Germany's problems. He described his dream of a strong, united Germany. The book became very popular. When Hitler left prison, the Nazi Party was weak. But he had a new plan. He would not try to take power by force again. He would use the system. He would win through politics. Slowly, the Nazis began to grow again. They spoke to workers, farmers, and young people. They used radio, posters, and newspapers to spread their message. In the late 1920s, the world changed again. A global financial crisis hit. The Great Depression began. In Germany, things became even worse. Banks failed, businesses closed, millions lost their jobs, people felt helpless. And when people are desperate, they look for strong answers. Hitler gave them those answers. He promised jobs. He promised food. He promised to make Germany great again. He said, "I will lead you to a better future." His speeches were simple but powerful. He repeated the same messages. Germany was strong, the enemies were weak, and only he could save the nation. By 1930, the Nazi Party was gaining seats in the government. In 1932, Hitler ran for president. He lost to Paul von Hindenburg but received millions of votes. This showed how popular he had become. He was not just a loud voice anymore. He was a real political force. In January 1933, a historic decision was made. President Hindenburg named Hitler the Chancellor of Germany. It was a legal move, but many hoped it would calm him down. They thought they could control him. They were wrong. As Chancellor, Hitler moved fast. He pushed for new laws. Just weeks later, a fire burned down the Reichstag, the German parliament building. Hitler blamed communists. He used the event to gain emergency powers. He said it was for national security. He arrested opponents. He banned other parties. In 1934, when President Hindenburg died, Hitler took full control. He became the Führer, Germany's leader. There were no more elections, no more free speech, no more debate. The Nazi Party had become the only party. The government now served Hitler. The police now served Hitler. The army swore loyalty to Hitler. This was no longer a democracy. It was a dictatorship. And the world was starting to pay attention. How did a failed artist and angry soldier rise to power in less than 15 years? By using pain, fear, and hope, by blaming others, by repeating simple messages, by promising a future only he could deliver. But power without limits is dangerous, and the most dangerous part of Hitler's plan was still to come. With full control over Germany, Adolf Hitler began to turn his ideas into reality. What started as angry words in books and speeches was now becoming real laws and deadly actions. Hitler's vision for Germany was extreme, and now he had the power to shape the country as he wished. One of his first goals was to make Germany strong again. He focused on rebuilding the army. This was illegal under the Treaty of Versailles, but Hitler ignored the rules. He built tanks, airplanes, and ships. He trained soldiers. He also began to prepare the country for war, even though he told the world he wanted peace. To keep the people on his side, Hitler used media and education. Radios played speeches praising the Nazi Party. Posters showed Hitler as a hero. In schools, children learned Nazi ideas. They were taught to love their country, hate its enemies, and obey their leader. Boys were trained to be soldiers. Girls were trained to be mothers of strong German children. The Nazi message was everywhere. People who disagreed were silenced. Newspapers that criticized the government were shut down. Writers, artists, and teachers who refused to support Hitler lost their jobs or were arrested. Fear became part of daily life. But Hitler's most dangerous beliefs were about race. He believed in something called Aryan superiority. He said that Germans with blue eyes and blonde hair were the best. He believed that other races were weaker or dangerous. He especially hated Jewish people. He blamed them for Germany's problems and for the loss of World War I. These ideas had no truth, but Hitler used them to unite his followers against a common enemy. In 1935, Hitler passed the Nuremberg Laws. These laws took away the rights of Jewish people. Jews could no longer marry non-Jews. They could not be teachers, doctors, or lawyers. They lost their jobs. They were no longer citizens. These laws were the beginning of something terrible. Over the next few years, life became harder and more dangerous for Jews in Germany. Shops were closed. Homes were attacked. People were beaten in the streets. Many tried to leave the country, but it wasn't easy. Other countries were slow to accept refugees. Doors were closed when people needed them open. In November 1938, a violent event shocked the world. It was called Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. Nazi gangs destroyed Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues across Germany. More than 30,000 Jews were arrested and sent to camps. The name came from the broken glass that covered the streets. But what it really showed was that worse things were coming. While all this was happening at home, Hitler was also looking outside of Germany. He wanted more land. He believed that Germans needed more space to grow. In 1938, he took control of Austria without firing a single shot. Many Austrians welcomed him. A few months later, he demanded part of Czechoslovakia. European leaders, hoping to avoid war, gave in. They thought peace was more important than standing up to him, but Hitler was not satisfied. In 1939, he signed a secret deal with the Soviet Union. They agreed not to fight each other, and just days later, Hitler invaded Poland. This time, the world responded. Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. Hitler had promised peace. He had promised safety. But he had prepared for war. And now he had started one that would become the deadliest in history. Millions of soldiers marched across Europe. Bombs fell on cities. Countries fell one by one. In a matter of months, Hitler's army controlled much of Europe. But this war was not just about soldiers and battles. It was also about something far more evil. Hitler began building concentration camps. At first, they were used to hold political prisoners, people who spoke against him. But soon, they became places of torture and death. Jews, Roma people, people with disabilities, and others were sent to these camps. They were starved, beaten, and killed. This was the beginning of the Holocaust, a time when over 6 million Jews were murdered. Hitler called it the final solution. He wanted to remove all Jews from Europe. The Nazi government built death camps with gas chambers. Entire families were taken from their homes and never seen again. The world did not know the full truth at first, but people who escaped began to tell their stories. The truth slowly came out, and still the killing continued. Hitler's dream of a perfect Germany was built on hate, violence, and fear. He controlled his people by giving them enemies to blame. He promised greatness but delivered war and destruction. He told lies, and too many people believed them. But even as he gained more power, the seeds of his defeat were already growing. The countries he attacked began to fight back. His enemies were learning, organizing, and pushing against him. The world was changing again, and the war Hitler started would not end the way he imagined. As World War II spread across Europe, Adolf Hitler believed he was unstoppable. His armies moved fast. Country after country fell: Poland, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, France. Within months, much of Europe was under Nazi control. Hitler stood on top of a growing empire, but he wanted more. In 1941, Hitler made a risky decision. He broke his agreement with the Soviet Union. He sent millions of soldiers to invade the East. The operation was called Operation Barbarossa. At first, it looked like another victory. The German army pushed deep into Soviet land. Cities fell. Soldiers were captured. Hitler believed this war would end quickly, but he was wrong. The Soviet Union was huge and its people were determined. The German army was not prepared for the long, cold winter. Supplies ran out. Soldiers froze. Fighting became harder. In cities like Leningrad and Stalingrad, the Soviets refused to surrender. Slowly, the tide began to turn. At the same time, another major event changed the course of the war. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor. The next day, the U.S. entered the war. Now Hitler faced powerful enemies on both sides: the Soviet Union in the East and the U.S. and Britain in the West. Hitler kept pushing forward. He believed victory was still possible. He ignored advice. He refused to accept defeat. He stayed in his headquarters, giving orders that made less and less sense. His world was becoming smaller. His plans were falling apart. Meanwhile, the crimes of the Nazi regime continued. The Holocaust reached its most deadly phase. Death camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor were in full operation. Trains full of people arrived every day. Most were killed within hours. Others were forced to work until they died from hunger, disease, or abuse. The world began to learn about these horrors. Some people tried to stop them. Brave individuals hid Jewish families. Resistance movements grew in occupied countries. People risked their lives to fight back. But still, millions were lost. In 1943, the German army suffered a major defeat at Stalingrad. It was a turning point. After that, the Allies began to win more battles. They pushed German forces out of Africa. They bombed German cities. They planned a huge invasion. In June 1944, Allied forces landed in France. This was D-Day. It was one of the largest military operations in history. Thousands of ships, planes, and soldiers crossed the sea. They fought on the beaches. They moved through towns and cities. They freed France, then Belgium, then the Netherlands. Back in Germany, the pressure was growing. Cities were being destroyed. Factories were in ruins. Food was running out. People were losing faith. Some German leaders tried to kill Hitler in 1944. They planted a bomb near him. It exploded, but Hitler survived. He became more paranoid. He trusted fewer people. By early 1945, the war was nearly over. The Soviet army was closing in from the east. The U.S. and British armies were closing in from the west. Berlin, the capital of Nazi Germany, was surrounded. Hitler moved into an underground bunker. He was tired, sick, and angry. In those final days, Hitler continued to give orders. He still believed he could win. But it was clear Germany had lost. Cities were falling. Soldiers were surrendering. His dream was gone. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler killed himself in his bunker. His wife, Eva Braun, died with him. Just days later, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. But the damage was beyond imagination. More than 60 million people died in World War II, millions of Jews and others were murdered in the Holocaust. Cities were in ruins. Families were broken. The world had been changed forever. And at the center of it all was one man, a man whose hate and ambition led to the greatest tragedy in modern history. Hitler was gone, but the world would never forget what he did. The crimes of the Nazis were revealed in full. The survivors told their stories. Trials were held. Justice was slow, but it came. From the ashes of war, people made a promise: never again, and that promise still echoes today. After the war ended in 1945, the world began to take a deep breath. The fighting had stopped, but the pain remained. Cities were destroyed. Millions were dead. Families were torn apart. Soldiers returned home with wounds that could not be seen. And as the dust settled, one question echoed across the world: how could this have happened? The answers came slowly, piece by piece. In the months and years after the war, the full truth of the Holocaust was uncovered. Soldiers who had fought against Nazi Germany discovered concentration camps. What they found shocked them. Thin, starving people, piles of bodies, rooms full of shoes, glasses, and personal items, gas chambers, ovens, records of murder. The crimes were larger than anyone had imagined. Survivors began to tell their stories. They spoke of families taken in the night, of cattle trains packed with people, of hunger and fear, of never knowing if they would live to see another day. These stories were painful but important. The world needed to listen. The world needed to remember. The Nazi leaders who survived the war were arrested. They were put on trial in the city of Nuremberg. The Nuremberg trials became one of the most important events in modern law. For the first time, world leaders were held responsible for crimes against humanity. Judges from the United States, Britain, the Soviet Union, and France listened to the evidence. Documents, films, and witness testimony showed the scale of the Nazi crimes. Some of the most powerful men in Hitler's government were found guilty. Many were sentenced to death. Others were sent to prison. The trials sent a clear message. No one is above the law, not even presidents, not even generals. If you commit crimes, you will be held accountable. But justice alone could not heal the world. Europe had to rebuild. Germany, once the center of Hitler's dreams, was now divided. The country was split into 4 parts, each controlled by a different allied power: the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. In 1949, 2 new countries were formed: West Germany and East Germany. West Germany became a democracy supported by the Western powers. East Germany became a communist state under Soviet influence. This division would last for more than 40 years. Across the world, leaders began to ask new questions. How do we stop this from happening again? How do we protect human rights? How do we build peace? One answer came in 1945 with the creation of the United Nations. The goal was clear: to bring countries together to solve problems peacefully and to prevent future wars. The horrors of World War II gave the world a reason to try harder. The Holocaust also led to new human rights laws. In 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed. It said that all people have the right to life, freedom, and safety. It said that no one should be tortured, that everyone has the right to education and work. These ideas were not just words, they were promises made in the memory of those who were lost. In Germany, people began to reflect on their history. For many years, the topic of Hitler and the Nazis was painful and avoided. But over time, schools began to teach the truth. Museums were built. Memorials were placed where Jews had been taken and killed. The country began to face its past. Young generations asked questions. They wanted to know how one man could control so many, how people could follow such evil. These questions didn't have easy answers, but they were necessary. The world also began to see the power of propaganda. People saw how words, repeated again and again, could turn neighbors into enemies. How fear could be used to gain control. How silence from those who knew better allowed evil to grow. And so the story of Adolf Hitler became more than just history. It became a warning about hate, about blind obedience, about the dangers of unchecked power. But it also became a lesson about bravery, about the people who resisted, about the importance of truth, about standing up when something is wrong, even when it is hard. In schools, students now read the stories of Holocaust survivors. They visit memorials. They learn not just what happened, but why it matters. The survivors, many now old, continue to speak. They say, "Never forget," because forgetting allows history to repeat. And they know what that looks like. The world after Hitler was not perfect. Wars still happened. Injustice still exists. But people had seen the worst, and that memory pushed them to try harder to be better. Adolf Hitler died in 1945, but the effects of his actions live on. Every time we speak against hate, every time we defend human rights, we are answering the question that echoed after the war. How could this have happened? And how do we make sure it never happens again? Even decades after his death, Adolf Hitler's name remains one of the most recognized and feared in all of history. His actions changed the world. His ideas caused pain that reached across countries and generations. But his story is not just about one man. It's about what happens when hate is given power. It's about how fear can be turned into violence, and how ordinary people can be pushed to do extraordinary harm. So what can we learn from the story of Adolf Hitler? First, we learn that leadership has great power. A leader's words matter. When those words spread lies or hatred, they can lead to terrible actions. Hitler used speeches, books, and laws to turn his ideas into reality. He blamed certain groups for Germany's problems. He created enemies where there were none, and people listened. Second, we learn how important it is to question what we hear. In Nazi Germany, many people followed orders without asking questions. Some were afraid. Some believed the lies. Some stayed silent. But silence can be dangerous. When we stop thinking for ourselves, we become easy to control. Third, we see how hard it can be to stand up, but also how necessary it is. Not everyone supported Hitler. Some people risked their lives to help Jews escape. Some fought in secret groups. Others spoke the truth even when it was dangerous. These people remind us that courage often means doing what is right, not what is easy. We also learn that education matters. Hitler came to power in a time of crisis. People were poor and angry. They wanted someone to lead them. They wanted simple answers. Hitler gave them those answers, but they were based on hate and lies. A better education might have helped people think more clearly. It might have helped them resist. And finally, we learned that history should never be forgotten. After World War II, many people said, "Never again." But history has a way of repeating if we don't remember it. That is why we study stories like this. Not to spread fear, but to build understanding. Not to blame, but to learn. Adolf Hitler's story teaches us the worst that humans can do, but it also teaches us what to watch for in the future. When we see leaders using hate to gain power, we must speak out. When we see lies spreading, we must tell the truth. When we see injustice, we must act. Today, museums, books, documentaries, and survivors keep the memory alive. They tell the world, this happened, it was real, and it must not happen again. Across Europe and beyond, there are memorials. In Berlin, there is a large stone field built to honor the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. In Poland, the remains of Auschwitz stand as a warning. In cities around the world, there are plaques, statues, and exhibitions that show what hate can lead to. Students visit these places to learn. Teachers explain the past so the future can be different. Survivors speak to classrooms and write books. Their message is clear: remember, learn, and act. Language learners, too, can take part in this remembrance. By reading stories like this in English, you are not only improving your language, you are also learning history, culture, and the lessons that shape our shared humanity. You are learning how words can build or destroy, how ideas can inspire or divide, how leadership can heal or harm. The story of Adolf Hitler is one of the darkest in modern history, but by understanding it, we shine a light on the path forward. A path where kindness matters more than cruelty, where truth is stronger than lies, and where unity is more powerful than hate. As we finish this story, remember, history is not just about the past. It is also about the future we choose to create. Your voice matters, your actions matter. What you learn, what you share, and what you stand for, it all makes a difference. Let the memory of the past guide us toward a better tomorrow. Never forget. Always learn, and keep asking, how can we be better than those who came before us? Thank you for watching this important story. If this video helped you understand English and history better, let us know in the comments. What new words or ideas did you learn today? Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video with others who want to improve their English through real, meaningful stories. And remember, the best way to learn a language is through the power of storytelling. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next video.